What is going on, guys? Carter here with Edged Mindset. We're taking a look at a Hinderer knife here. Now, you may have noticed, as I slap this bad boy down, where is the lock? This doesn't look like a frame lock. That's because it's not a frame lock. This is a Hinderer liner lock. Now, okay, here's the story. I'm not a big Hinderer guy. I never have been. I was around during the initial Hinderer hype when they first dropped. When Rick started making the XM-18. I remember all the hype, and you couldn't get them except for like first responders and police. They were able to get a hold of them, so everyone was calling up their law enforcement buddy trying to see if they could score an XM-18. I was caught up in that a little bit, and I did get one or two of his XM series. I forget what the exact model. I assume XM-18 Spanto 3.5. I'd have to go back and look at my videos. And it was cool, but they never really grabbed me in a chokehold like Strider did, just because Strider kind of fit my kind of ethos more at the time. I really liked the idea of just kind of rough and tumble, kind of crudish type, military-esque type things a little bit more than what Hinderer is doing. Even though on paper I should really like Hinderer, but maybe that's a different video altogether where I deep dive into that. But then I kind of fell off, and I just, Hinderer was never really my thing. Flippers have never been my favorite, although I do, out of all the flipper designs, I think, I do like Hinderer's flipper design, but just never really my thing. So I wasn't keeping tabs on it, but I was scrolling on Facebook, I don't know, maybe a month ago, and there was a comment on, I think somebody had posted one of these aggressor knives here, and there was a comment that was like, I'm going to wait for the liner lock version. And I was like, what? Liner lock version? What are you talking about, fool? So I started looking into it, and liner locks exist. And I found this guy in stock at American Made Blade, I think. USA Made Blade. That's what it is. Sorry. USA Made Blade. Found this guy in stock. And man, if you've followed my channel, I am a liner lock apologist. I've kind of been promoting liner locks for a long time. I feel like they've gotten a bad rap over the past, 10, 15 years. Ever since frame locks took off on the scene and got really, really huge. I feel like liner locks were kind of considered cheap, and people associated them with inexpensive, crappy knives. And of course, inexpensive, crappy knives did use liner locks a lot. So that's... Maybe this video isn't even going to be about this knife. So that's why. Liner locks partially have gotten a bad rap, because Michael Walker, who Michael Walker refined and popularized the liner lock years and years ago. And so it started being used in all kinds of knives, including very high-end fancy knives. And what do quote-unquote gas stations, what do they like to copy? They like to copy flashy, expensive type knives. So the gas station knives copied the Walker liner lock, but they did it very poorly, and they were cheaply done, and they would fail on you, and they were kind of crappy. And so in the early 2000s, frame locks really took off, but frame locks are very expensive because it's thick titanium, especially back then. And so you would only see frame locks done on higher end knives. And so they were executed very, very well. And so it was one of those things where liner locks didn't really get a fair shake, because liner locks didn't really make it into that resurgence of that high-end, mid-tier kind of tactical folder world. They were kind of left with the cheap knives, and people made an association with them that they were cheap and poorly done, because that's what you'd usually see them as. And they associated high-quality locks and geometry with the frame locks. So, not really a fair shake, and that held for a lot of years. Some of your new guys might be like, what are you talking about? For a long time, liner locks were demonized, and nobody liked them and nobody wanted them. But they're starting to come back. And I really, really like it, because there's a lot of benefits to liner locks. And you'll see that in this Hinderer knife here. Not only aesthetically, just having the two G10 scales on both sides is really, really nice. You don't have to deal with any issues of finger placement when you deploy the knife. We've all been there where you go to grab maybe a flipper or a thumb stud deployment frame lock, and you're accidentally putting even just a little bit of pressure on this lock bar here. I have that problem with small knives, because I've got long fingers, and so if I'm trying to deploy a small knife, it's a lot of times really hard for me not to put any pressure on here. And sometimes it is just very difficult to actually deploy the damn thing with your right hand. I've got knives that when I pull it out, I use my left hand to open it up because I'm not putting pressure on that lock bar. Don't have that problem here because it's completely encapsulated. It also has less parts, right? There's no need for over travel involved here because this scale is over travel. Now, when I first showed this knife, on some shorts, a couple things people brought up that I want to address. First one was how early the lockup was. And you might be looking at this and you might be saying, that's not early, that's perfect. It is now, but yeah, out of the box, the lockup was like here, right? But that was literally like I had gotten it that day and I shot a video. Now it has broken in. So back here on these stops here, you can see the wear from deploying this, as well as just doing some hard opens. And that basically set that lock. So as these thumb studs or stop pins, I mean, these are actually stop pins, although you can use them as thumb studs. As these stop pins start to divot into the titanium on both sides here, this blade is going to seat back like a fraction of a millimeter, right? And as this seats back further, this lock on the blade side is going to seat up a little more, which allows the lock bar to move in a little bit. Why am I explaining that? It's because if you get a knife and the lockup is early, depending on the style of knife, depending on how the lockup works, it might not be a bad thing, and it may be a good thing. Because as you use it and do some hard opens, which I can't really demonstrate here because of the angle of the camera here, but you do some hard opens and it will kind of seat this and this will move in. Had it came out of box like this, after it wore in and started to move in, it would be pretty far in there, and I don't think I would like it very much. So the idea is, as I continue to use this, as I cut through material, put more and more pressure on it, things start to seat in and things like that, I would suspect this will probably move so that this outside line is in line with the blade tang, and then it'll probably stay there for like a million years. Well, not a million years, but it'll stay there for a long, long time before it moves in any further. So I'm all over the place on this video. This is a Sponto working finish. We got the red brick scales. I think it looks really good with the working finish hardware. I bronzed the stock hardware on here because the shiny satin just didn't really go with it, and I didn't want to fork out the $100+ to get a new set to put on here. Because the stock hardware on Hinderers are titanium, and so you can anodize them yourself with heat or electricity if you have the means. It didn't turn out as well as I would like. I've got some weird color things going on, and then when I tightened this pivot screw here, I kind of scuffed up inside there. I didn't really think about protecting it, but overall I think it looks better, especially these body screws. I did all the stuff. With heat anodizing, you're going to get color variation, especially with things like this, because it's hard to kind of, as you're heat anodizing each piece, it's hard to get them exact. You can see how these are more bronzy. This one's starting to go a little blue, but it's also hard to tell if I overheated this one or underheated this one. I don't know exactly. So I thought about trying to fix it, but if I was going in the wrong direction, I'll just make it worse. You can see some blues coming in the standoffs here as well. So that was the first thing people talked about, this lockup. Now, this does not have a lock bar insert, right? This is pure titanium that's been carbonized. So there is no stick or anything going on here. In fact, the action on this is better than any of the frame lock Hinderers I've ever owned. It has a very crisp detent, but an extremely smooth action. Just due to the nature of it being a liner lock instead of a frame lock, it is really nice. No issue thumb flicking, finger flicking. I know some people struggle with the thumb flick. I do as well, like this one here, which is still fairly new, and I haven't done any adjustments to the lock bar. I can reverse flick it. It is very, very stout, but if I try to thumb flick it, once again, I'm putting too much pressure on this lock bar, and it has a very stout detent, and I can't really thumb flick it. Flipper works good, but the action on this guy is just something else. It is really, really nice. I would put this up against at least this example. This is the only liner lock Hinderer I've ever handled. So I don't know if they're all this good, but I would, as I fail it, I would put this up against any modern action. Like it is, especially once it breaks in, right? So that's the other thing. Lock bar breaks in, but then you also have a detent ball, which is ceramic, by the way, that's kind of building its path on this blade. These don't come pre-broken in. So yes, when you first open the knife out of the box, you might be like, what is Edge Mindset talking about? This action's a little chalky. It's still good, but it's not as good as it gets after like a week of using it, playing with it, opening it. Now it is like just butter smooth. Such good action. No movement, no wiggle in the lockup. It is rock solid with this liner lock here. The other thing people commented about is how thick this liner is. And one of the comments they said is, how is this not just a frame lock with a scale over the top of it? Yeah, I mean, that's what a liner lock is, right? You could take any liner lock, remove the scale, put it back together. Now you have a really skinny frame lock with no over travel. I mean, that's essentially what it is. But yes, this is a really thick titanium lock with a really thick titanium liner. And they did this so that they didn't modify the ergonomic profile of the knife, which is a good move, you know? So it is the same thickness as a standard frame lock right there. So they didn't modify that at all. Now, I would suspect part of the reason they sided with thick titanium liners, particularly on this side, is to keep the scales even and to possibly, I haven't verified this, so please take this with a grain of salt, but I would assume that at least this show side scale here is the skinny scale, right, of the thin frame locks that they do. And so they can kind of repurpose these. Now, this is obviously new because no other knife has a lock side scale. But it also creates an even symmetrical setup, right? With both of these titanium liners being the same thickness and then the scales being the same thickness, all equating to the exact same handle profile of the standard thickness XM-18. And as far as this lock bar being thick, it's better. Right? At least in my opinion, you get way more lock coverage. It's going to wear out way slower because you're getting more contact. Let's see if we can see. So that's the contact. I got a shadow there. That's the contact we're getting. It's that nice crescent shape that we want to see where more of it's loaded towards the front of the blade here. I mean, the front of the blade when it's open. And then it kind of trails off, right? So that gives you, so this front here is where you're going to get that good solid lockup. You want to have that contact. And then the trail off towards the back here, I mean, this is really like textbook good contact here. The trail off to the back there really just serves as more contact point, which is less wear, right? Because you have less of a focal point of the titanium hitting up against that steel and just make it last longer and you get more purchase on there. So really well done. I really like this thing, and I did find out, okay, so going back to the beginning of the video, which I probably should have said this before, I guess I'm not alone with these liner locks. A lot of people don't know they exist. They're not new. I found videos on YouTube from about 4 years ago, people talking about liner locks. So the concept isn't super new. However, Hinderer just doesn't do them often. So they're pretty rare when they do a run of liner locks. So right now, it's my mission to collect two kinds of Hinderers. Despite this one that I just got. I like to collect Hinderer liner locks of all varieties, I think is what I'm going to go after. And flipperless models are my favorite as well. I do have a flipperless standard Bowie outside of the Tanto Bowie here, the aggressor blade. Yeah, so I think it's really cool. I know liner locks isn't everybody's kind of cup of tea. Oh, another thing is price. So these are priced the exact same, and I know some people struggle with that. I would have to agree to a certain extent. Like, I think the liner lock should be a little bit cheaper. Now, most of the work is work. It's not going to be that different, right? Because even on this liner, you have the same kind of machining, right? You have this frag pattern grip over there. It's chamfered on this side. You have a relief cutout. All of the jimping is the same as this knife. But there are certain things that are just less machining and less parts, right? Like this over travel disc. Not only is there a disc here with a screw, but you've got to mill out the pocket for it to live in. You've got this lock bar insert with a screw on this side. You've got to mill out that side, put that in there. So I don't know. I do feel like instead of $425, maybe these should be $400. You know, not a huge difference, but just kind of a little bit of a show of faith to say, yeah, we recognize that there's a little bit less involved in this knife than the frame lock, so we're going to knock the price down just a little bit, inconsequentially. But at the end of the day, you know, economics and, or not economics, but, you know, the market, right? They don't make a lot of these, so they sell because, you know, and this isn't really what they're kind of shooting for. So 5.5 ounces on the liner lock. Let's see what the frame lock version is. 5.4. So it's like, I was actually surprised. I thought the liner lock would be slightly lighter. So you can see how it's not even that there's less material here. It's just distributed differently. Like they've taken some of the titanium on the lock side and they've just moved it over to a much thicker liner, because this one also has a liner, but you can see how much thinner it is. And then, of course, they've added another G10 scale. So material-wise, it's about the same-ish. You know, and less G10, like this is the thicker G10 scale. You can see right there, and it's almost like if you were to cut it in half, you'd about get what's here. So very cool. I like it. Really glad I picked this one up. I don't know if I love the hardware job I did, so I may pick up something. I don't know. I would like to get a hardware kit for this, but just hard to justify the money for not much. Like what I honestly would like on this is just working finish hardware, but I just struggle with the idea of paying $115 for just another set of titanium hardware that's been blasted and tumbled. I'm like, you know, I could probably just have somebody do that. Well, not probably. I could just have somebody do that to these, right? I could send these to somebody, they can sandblast it, throw it in the tumbler, and I could have my own set for, you know, half the cost. Because like I said, this is titanium hardware. Everything except for the actual pivot collar, which is why even when you buy replacement kits, it doesn't come with that, because this is steel over there, but everything else is titanium. Even these small screws down here, you can see that I bronzed those as well. Although I'm feeling like there is different alloys, titanium alloys, because they don't all anodize the same. The screws anodize a little bit less than some of the other things like the standoffs and stuff. So I'm thinking it has maybe a lower quality alloy on some of the screws. I don't know. I'm going off on a tangent here. All right, guys. So liner locks, we covered a lot of ground here. Talked about Hinderer liner locks in general, all that stuff. Comment down below. What do you think of liner locks? What do you think of this Hinderer? Is it something you'd ever get? Thanks for hanging out. I'm out.